All right, everyone, welcome back. This is Beneath the Helmet. This is episode 112, episode 112. I'm your host, Arjuna George, former fire chief turned podcaster, author, and coach to the fire service. Today, I have a former Navy Command Master Chief, podcaster, author, fire service leader, and founder of Firehouse Freedom. Welcome to the show, Flip Griffin.
It's time to ignite your soul and unlock your full potential. Join us on Beneath the Helmet, the podcast exploring firefighters' health and wellness. Hosted by retired fire chief Arjuna George, our podcast is the perfect place to start your journey towards becoming the best version of yourself. So come on, let's join the conversation and find out what sets your soul on fire.
Hey, brother. How are you?
Real good, real good. Thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, excited to be here.
Fantastic. So share with our listener a little bit of who Flip is and kind of your journey through the Navy and then how that introduced you to the fire service and then why leadership is so important to you, because that's what we're going to be talking about today is everything leadership.
Yeah, sure. So a connection to Canada, obviously, born and raised in Buffalo, New York, and my father's side of the family is from Oshawa and living in Brantford and Hamilton and everything else. So very familiar with our northern brethren. I haven't been there all the time, brothers and sisters, I should say. But yeah, so born and bred there, was supposed to go to college, but found out it wasn't for me. So joined the Navy at like 1920, way back in 96. And just kind of, interestingly, I didn't know what the path was going to be when I first started it. It was kind of just, it was, I didn't really know. I just was kind of joining, was kind of a lost soul, one of those things, went to college for a year, just not what I wanted at that time, not for me. And so, which was fine. And then really still got in and was still like, okay, what's going on? And got to go to the Presidential Honor Guard because that was Clinton's inauguration for us back in 96. So got to go there. And then really just by happenstance I'll date myself already to start, but was rollerblading on the steps of like the U.S. Treasury Department when you used to be able to just, go up to close to those buildings, and got hurt. And then went to medical that night, and kind of ever since was like, oh man, the medical side of the world fascinates me, and kind of that drove me towards emergency medicine and kind of into that. And then got into search and rescue, which was a small, we called them an NEC, a Naval Enlisted Classification, but it's just a job scope. But again, nothing had kicked off, right? It wasn't 2001 yet, which was kind of the huge thing for everyone. And so was just kind of was doing it, but it was fun. It was great. Then all of a sudden, 2001 kicked off, and then all of a sudden the world just, everything changed, as you and probably the listeners all know. And so, but ironically, did SAR all the way through. So like in a small nutshell, I went from Puerto Rico, where I started. We did a lot of overwater stuff, worked with the FBI and some special operations groups to support them. Went up to Whidbey Island, so not too far, right? And from Vancouver, so went up there, did completely different type of rescue stuff, which was this very much Coast Guard owned the ocean, we owned all the mountains, we were doing all this mountain stuff, kind of ifans all the way through there. And then went to Japan for it, and so got to do a whole different world there. Went out on the USS Kitty Hawk, was there, left right before the Fukushima disaster, but got called kind of as the liaison to go, hey, can you help us out? I was already by that time I had moved to Pensacola to be an instructor at Rescue Swimmer School. And then from there, I was supposed to I had one route to go, and then I was going to kind of hang it up, and then all of a sudden, fate intertwined and said, hey, we need you to go here. And that's when ISIS had kicked off in 2015. So then we're back into the desert doing those types of stuff. And then finally was like, all right, I'm going to do the leadership thing. And so went the command route, became a command senior chief, was fortunate enough to get picked up for command master chief, was at VX-23, which is like an attested evaluation squadron. So I did a lot of drone stuff in there and kind of infrastructure things. literally though, and this is true, AJ, like all the way through, I didn't realize my little job scope was we were embedded and with the fire and EMS services of every place I went. So when I was in Whidbey Island, like we were embedded with the SAR groups, and we were embedded with the Anacortes Fire Department, and working with like all the departments everywhere I was with. So, and I think most of us know this too, and I think it's happened, all across North America is the term, but I was on the paramedic side of the house, and now they've all gotten absorbed by fire services, right? So what's ended up happening is it naturally has turned into this like, well, how do I give back? And what I realized was, and it's beneath the helmet, so I can say this too with my mental health provider. I learned about 2 months ago the reasons why the fire service is so connected of the hierarchies, just like the military is like, and I thought police was too, and it's actually not. It's very different in that sense. So there's this huge connection. It was, if I was civilian side, I would have got absorbed anyways, I'm sure, because I would have stayed this route and loved it. So I probably would have been there. And look, when you're sleeping on the, in the firehouse, or you're sleeping at the squadron or whatever it is in the SAR bunker, it's all the same. Like a lot of that is the same of the brethren and kind of with that. And it requires, to this point, the same leadership. So the second part of that was towards the end of my career, I really fell. So I'll give a little background and history for the listeners. So in the United States Navy specifically, it's the only service in all of the United States services anyways, that is, when you make E7, so we go from E1 all the way up to E9, and then the last three ranks are chief, senior chief, and master chief. And then you could become a command master chief, which is what I did. Well, when you make chief petty officer, you change uniforms, you change job scope, you go from being kind of the highest level worker bee to almost like when you go from, you become a battalion chief, right? So you're becoming this different level where you're the resident subject matter expert. We go through a 45-day initiation. Well, when that happens, every year that 45-day initiation it was a leadership training. So we would give, it's a lot about time management. It's a lot about changing rank. You change uniforms. It's the only service that actually changes the exact uniform, from what you had before. And so that really stuck with me. I always loved the leadership piece, but like to be able to kind of teach and that leadership accountability stuff and how to kind of mold that was really where I first kind of the seed was planted in a way, right, to that level, and loved kind of the light bulbs, watching people's light bulbs go off and getting it, because it can be daunting. And there's so much stuff out there too, right? Like there's a lot of things that are out there. And so I just thought, as that went forward, I was like, I think we can do this. So when I retired in 2019, I joined up with a guy named Dale Walls from Lions Guide, and he was doing small business. He's a former Marine, loved kind of that same stuff. He was very big into self-discipline, which had parts of leadership, but as a small business owner, especially those sizes, he was really focusing on that small business owner and less about the team. So I came on board and I'm like, man, I can definitely talk team wise, and I love the team aspect of it. So let me jump in on that. So through that time with him, it was almost 5 years, I really formed the everyday leader kind of curriculum. And then towards the very end, before I kind of walked away not too long ago, I really started to go, I need to focus back. And it was, I always got to give this credit to Annapolis Fire Department. Nathan Powell, Chief Powell, came to me and us and said, we don't have this in the fire service. We don't have this type of training where you're talking about what you're talking about, kind of like, you have fire officer one, and kind of as you go through, you get little leadership tidbits. But as you know, AJ, we kind of go, hey, let's promote somebody. And then when they're in the seat, it's like trial by fire, right? Like, it's like, oh shit, I'm here now. What do I do? Type of a deal. And so I really thought that there's something that you can kind of move all the way through to it. And so specifically for us, that at the end of 25, we kind of did a test run, and man, it just took off for it. And so went full for it in in early 26, not too long ago. And it's been taken off ever since. And we really drive a couple things. One is this kitchen table mentality. I don't want to be a group or somebody that, look, I get the 50-year chief and they've got great C stories, or what I would call a C story or fire stories. And those are valuable. I think those, like, you can't lose our history of where we came from and that, right? But I think on another level, we have a very different generation that are coming in, and that we're seeing. And we've had this little gap, right, of everybody our age, I'm about to be 50. We're all this 9/11 kind of group where, right, like there was no need for motivation. We were all motivated because of what was happening. The towers came down and the iconic photo of the fire, everybody took that on board, right? Like that was like huge. And so we don't have that anymore. In fact, we have probably a nation more divided than ever, at least down here. And so you're starting to see, and I know you guys up north have this, like, it's burnout, it's retention, it's right recruitment. Like it flows both ways. And I think having this kitchen table mentality of saying, okay, hold on, I don't want to give flowery stuff, and that's cool. Let's talk about the nitty gritty of it all. So that whole thing really kind of came to be, and it's kind of where we're at now.
Wow, quite the journey you've experienced over your short time on this world. Yeah. Love it. Love it. Thanks for sharing that. So the kitchen table, let's dive into that. Just kind of kick it off here a little bit. What would be some things that would help the listener right now understand, all right, I want to take this kitchen table mindset concept in action. I want to bring it to the fire department tomorrow. What would be some things that they could kind of tools or strategies they could use to, open up the conversation, set a safe area for people to be open, authentic, vulnerable? What would you suggest to that person?
Yeah. So let me give a couple of examples of what I did and where it kind of came from, because I'll be honest, like, I didn't even think about it in the very beginning. It wasn't something that when I started the freedom piece, and I'll give a little background on that too. So Dale Walls had this piece called Founders Freedom, and it was about when you founded a business, something that was really important was, I'll give a guy who makes pizzas, right? This classic example, excuse me. You get a guy who's, in the neighborhood, and he loves to make pizzas. And every time they have a party, he makes the pizzas in his brick oven that he has, and everything's cool. So somebody convinced him, hey, you should start a business, right? So he does. And so he starts the business, and he quickly finds out owning a business is not about just making the pizzas. He's got to deal with HR, he's got to deal with logistics, he's got to deal with the landlord, he's got to deal with all these extra things. Well, Dale was smart enough to figure out and go, man, if you can compartmentalize those into something that's easy and digestible, you can get back to focusing on what you really came for. And let's be honest, all of us have a screw loose in our head to do kind of what we're doing, right? Like, like if I'm going to tell you to run into a fire, if I'm going to tell you to jump out of a helicopter or whatever, like, there's something that you got to convince people to do that. And so when he had this founder freedom idea, I was like, it's the same thing on the fire. Like, I want to reduce kind of the impact of the firehouse, because what I realized was the Fireground is very different in leadership than the firehouses, right? Like, it's completely different. And we've been in this, in the history of fire service across North America has been such that you take listening to the guy and girl in the white helmet, and then you go back and you try to do it the same way, and it doesn't work like that, right? It's not the same, because there's so much more dynamics at the firehouse than there is in the Fireground. It's actually easier, right? Like, I used to think too, like when I deployed, it was so much easier deploying, because God bless my wife who took care of the kids and the bills and everything. I could just focus on doing the job I was supposed to. Well, that's kind of how it is on the Fireground, right? Like, if I'm on the Fireground, man, I'm just fighting the fire. I'm doing what I'm told through my helmet, right? Like, whatever it runs like that. So go back to this whole concept of kitchen table. I really think when you take the Fireground out and you go, okay, too many people are in their offices and they say they have an open door policy, and that's great. But if they're not coming in, you don't have an open door policy, right? Like, it's not like that. And the truth be told, and this is the other part, today's generation, we know, right? I got one here. We know where we're doing. So I kind of look at it more as, we used to call this deck plate leadership in the Navy. Like, and it was really, or we also call it intrusive leadership by submarines. And I had a lot more control. I get it. Like, I'm not blind to the fact that we didn't have control. I think there's some people out there who are prior military who kind of they believe in some ways that, this model will fit. The military model fits everybody. Well, you have so much more control, and you have a lot more screening to some extent, where you're getting like the best of the best. And not to say that those people don't have problems too, but it's a lot more control. Well, as well as I do, fire service doesn't have as much. Somebody could go, I'm done, goodbye, right? I'm a volunteer, I don't need to be here, I'm out, right? Whatever the case is. So the kitchen table mentality to me is really about saying, okay, take your rank off, sit down, and just have these conversations that you normally wouldn't as a human to human, right? I mean, under the helmet is the classic. It's a great way to kind of put it, to go, this is about being human, right? Like, it's not about this other stuff that we have, but it is about accountability. But accountability is something that I feel, in my eyes, you got to show it before you can, look at it from other people. You have to show what you're doing by your example, by everything else. And I think the kitchen table is the great equalizer, right? Like, it's the great equalizer of going, we're the same. Because look at all the stuff that happens at a kitchen table, right? Like, you can play games. There's no rank in some of the card games you play. There's no rank in a lot of that stuff. And that went back to a lot of the stuff in the helicopter. Like, when we got into the helicopter, and how I got Flip was a call sign type nickname. And we do those for a little history lesson. The reason those call signs exist is so when you get in the cockpits, or you get in there is no rank, right? There's no, because if it's an emergency, if it's a safety something, my voice is as equal as anyone else's in the helicopter community. And so they were really important. So I thought, what equalizes all of us in the firehouse? And I was like, it's the kitchen table, right? It's the great equalizer in all of it. And so I think, to start out, just sitting down again, because some people don't. Like, I went to a department, and I was like, their kitchen table was like in their garage, like their storage area. And I'm like, where'd this go? Like, oh, we just never used it. And I'm like, let's bring that out, dust it off, clean it. So, we got beautiful tables out there that are out there, And so it was this whole mentality of saying, let's get centered again on people and humans. And I'll say this, to add to this, kind of what drove this a little bit more, was this, the Gen Z, right? They want to feel, so I'm going to say this, and people will cringe, but they trust influencers over institutions, right? And the fire department is an institution. But the word influencer shouldn't make you cringe if you just changed it to, they trust leaders over the entire institution. So now you're telling me they'll look up to people. They want authentic things. They don't want fakeness, right? Because they've had it all their lives. And so I use the example all the time, and we all heard this, when the phone came out, we were talking about how people would use filters and take fake pictures and everything else. Now I have a 19 and a 17-year-old girl. They just snap pictures of whatever they're in whenever. I mean, it's the most raw picture you can have. And I use the example all the time in our workshops to say, that's what they're looking for. They're not looking for you to be this polished whatever. They know you're human. They know that. So what makes that happen? Get at the kitchen table. That'll equalize everybody. Nobody's at a desk where it's not, right? It's an equal ground, kind of. It's an equal battleground to be. So that's really what KTM, the kitchen table mentality, is all about, is getting back to details where we can really work on stuff that matter. Because I think you can solve more. I wrote a quote the other day that I thought was pretty interesting. It was like, the kitchen table has solved more problems than any emails or meetings probably ever have in the history of our service. So I just feel like that's really where we need to go, and almost a grassroots campaign back to it.
Love it. And also at the kitchen table, there's always food. And in my thought, food's always that kind of general thing that allows people to relax a little bit,
Yeah.
be calm, listen because they're chewing. And there's
Yeah.
so many different elements of how that can work, right? So yeah, I love that.
It's a great point too.
Yeah, the Gen Zs, I think, wouldn't that be refreshing to not have to wear a mask every day, to pretend you're somebody else and just be more authentic and more you? That'd be something else.
Yeah, I think we've gotten, look, and we're all this generation, right? I'm a Gen Xer, right? So, and everybody in between, we've all been influenced by whatever it was, right? The millennials and that group of entitlement and everything else. Like we created all this, right? We get it, right? We're a boomer. We came from boomers. They're moving out. We're moving, right? So I get it, but I just, and the hierarchy of the fire department and the history is also kind of a friction point too, where people are going, we got people screaming about accountability and we don't need to change and everything else. And my whole, my whole thing is that I don't want departments to change. I don't. But there is a way of getting the same effect without maybe doing it in such a traditional way, right? Like maybe you change your probies a little bit more where you're not hammering them in the very beginning. Maybe you're more accepting in the beginning because you're trying to get them in, you're trying to get them accepted and really know. Because if you asked all of us what this is all about, it's about family, it's about a brotherhood, sisterhood, it's about like the core of what we want it to know. And what I would, if I was to, is the rescue me, Kurt Russell, right, get back draft, it's honoring, like that type of stuff, I don't think ever should go away. But maybe it's you don't have to use the hammer as much in the very beginning as much as you use the sugar or the salt, right? Like there's just things I think we can do a little bit easier to go, and while not thinking, well, I'm making it too easy on them. We're not. Like you can still. I'm still about, like probably should still get some shit. Like I'm not about not that, right? And there's history. I think maybe changing your order of how you do things, or whatever that is. And I think it's way more too about mentorship and not letting them just figuring out on their own what it is. They're gonna get that, right? We have this. So it's interesting. The more departments I talk to, the more what I'm finding is we have this very senior group at the top, almost battalion chief level and above. And then we've got this gap. And then we've got these really intense 9 to 10 year kind of almost captain-y, right? Lead engineer types who are they're right there. And some of them are very comfortable where they're at. And the other ones are, like they're ready and chopping, but there's this like vacuum in between of like that group. And I'm trying to figure that out, where that has come from, like specifically. But again, get around the table. Like you'll figure it out very quickly of who's where. And like you said, like, I love that too, by the way. When your mouth is full, you shut up, right? You can't talk totally. So you can listen, right? Yeah, it's totally great. Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. So I'd be very curious, through your time in the military, do you see the fire service still as a paramilitary organization, or have we moved from that? What would be your view on that?
So I mentioned this before, and so I've never viewed it as that, right? So
okay.
I was.
You hear that quite often, right?
I know you do, and they're run a lot alike, right? Control's the big thing. You can walk away from the fire department any time you want, unless your enlistment's done or your time is done. You can't, and I think that's probably understated more than really is, because that is a huge piece and a burden, of saying, it's like when somebody has a great retirement. Sure, they can do any business they want to because they have a retirement to fall back on. So it's not, the burden isn't all there. So I look at it the same way of saying that is a very distinct. However, how they run themselves is a lot alike. And I know that fire, EMS, police get all roped in together of kind of operating. And I mentioned this in the beginning, like I was going to my mental health provider, and he's an ex-police officer, and he described to me the difference of stating, like, police officers come in general, they get their assignments, they go off singly into their cars, and they experience their traumas, their instances, sometimes alone, right? And so it's not necessarily this, right? But fire departments don't, right? Like they stay in a group all the time, they go out all the time together. It's very much this, which is exactly how the military is, right? So if we're doing SAR, same way. I'm going out with my 4-person helicopter crew or whatever it was, right? Special operators, still a lot of them go out together in teams, right? Eight-man platoons, whatever it is. So there is a lot of similarities in that. And then obviously the risk, right? The risks of both sides are both there. So you go high performance, high risk, right? So what are you looking at, right? Here's where I look at it. And this is kind of my little math problem that I have. High risk plus high performance equals high accountability, right? So you need to have a very high accountability. So from a standpoint of saying, is it military? Is it not? Sure. I was at GEMS years ago where everybody was getting the black tactical, scissors, and they all want the combat, and let's be honest, war, that's 20 years ago. We made more advancements in medicine and trauma medicine than we have, 200 years prior to that, right? Like now our rates of saving people are incredible to do that, right? And that all translates back to, pre-hospital care in the civilian sector, right? Which 70%, just like up north, 70% is now all fire services are 70% doing EMS stuff. So do I see it as a paramilitary? Again, maybe from this side I don't, because it's right, it's not controlled like it is. But I understand like the comparisons to the two, especially in those kind of levels. And I think again, high performers plus high risk evolutions, has to have that high accountability attached to it. So I see it as that, and it definitely can be like the leadership side definitely translates, but you have to understand that not everything is going to translate. There's some, I'll give you an example without calling it out because it's good. I can remember using some people's, I'll just keep it at that, literature out there when I first started in small business. And I was using Call Sign Chaoses, which was General Mattis's book. And I was using it, and this woman was like, I don't understand how going through the streets of Baghdad with a tank equals right what we were talking about. And it fell on me at that. And I know that's the extreme, but there's a lot of people who go, hey, there's this book and there's this stuff. And I go, yeah. I go, how many of those people though are in your service, in your department? And they go, a couple? And I go, yeah. I said, you're gonna get a couple of people who are that way. And I said, but most people fall into the average category of not that. So it doesn't need to be this far, whether it's right or left, and that is not a political statement whatsoever, but it doesn't need to be one or the other. I think most people are going to fall into this center part of saying, look, I switch on when it needs to be switched on, and I need to switch off when it switches off. And what does that mean? Right. And I think that's what's taken sometimes out of context of the military and not. And there was a lot of times we weren't doing high speed stuff. We were doing just chill stuff, right? But when we needed to, we switched it on, switched it off. So again, a lot of I don't use the word paramilitary because it ties to like, well, we need to be this regiment. You don't. Like, I think you could be a lot more fluid in how, especially by the way, in the firehouse. When we move to the Fireground, I think that's a totally different statement of saying you need to be rigid. You need to be, the workflows, the processes have to be almost militaristic, right? Because that is to me, that's where your high risk is. So you add those training elements to that then.
Great points. Yeah, I think there's two things that I hear over and over again, and I just don't agree with it when I hear it is the fire service is a paramilitary organization. And then the other one is we're all type A's. I'm like, no, that's so far from the truth. I don't know why we keep saying that over and over again.
Yeah.
We talk about those two things always seem to pop up. We're all type A's, and we're all in a paramilitary organization. There's elements of it, just like you mentioned, but we're not 100% paramilitary.
I think when you need to be a type A, you turn on your type Aism. Like there's definitely that. But the same token, you can't be this driving type A person all the time, or you're not, right? Like then you're just going to lose people because we associate also type A with somebody who is so rigid that they don't see right the grays of it all. Like I've met a lot of people who are very black and white and go, well, it didn't say that. But just use your hold on, right? Or young people hear this when it comes to discipline. Well, she or he did the same thing. And I go, yeah, but you don't want it to be that. You don't want it to be that that black and white. You want your leaders. I tell people this all the time. They're like, well, you're going to have confusion at the junior ranks. I said, not if you have transparency, right, and honesty, and that, like, you'll understand by saying, hey, look, here's the deal. They may look the same, but they are very different situations, and you don't want them to be the same, because if I'm not going to judge you of who you are and what situation you're in the same way as I would someone else. If you both come late and one's done it a million times because they were hungover and you did because of your car, right, for the first time, you don't want me to hold you accountable the exact same way that I would hold someone else accountable for being late, right? And so that usually frees people up to go, okay, yeah, I guess you would want me to base it on my merits. Yep, absolutely. Like, I would base it on your merits rather than that. So, but you nailed it. Like, type A's, you need it. You definitely need that to be, and a version of it has to be turned on to do that job. That's that screw loose part to go, yep, I turned that on, type of a deal. So yeah, great points.
It's all situational, right? It's situational leadership.
Yeah.
Turn it on, turn it off. Change who you're
Yeah.
talking to. You change how you speak and how you communicate, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So you shared with me your core belief that leadership is built around everyday moments, not just the major events. Expand on that a little bit. What does that
Yeah.
mean? Because it kind of goes into what we've been talking about for the last few minutes here.
So the core of everything that I learned was I had this everyday leader course, and where that so I'll really show my dork side here. So big sci-fi guy, big fantasy guy, whatever. I own a comic book company with my next door neighbor that we do stuff with, and so that side of me is all in there. So huge Lord of the Rings fan, Tolkien. And so I was thinking about, once I retired, I would get a few calls from people who said, hey, Master Chief, Flip now, Keith, whatever. They're like, thank you so much for this. Nobody, and when I started to kind of look at what they were saying, no one ever said to me, hey, that rescue we did, that was awesome. Or, hey, that medal that you gave me, that you pushed for me, thank you so much. What they said was, hey, I'm back with my family again. Thanks for taking those extra moments to just talk to me and talk me off the ledge about this divorce and whatever it was. Or the lieutenant who was like, hey, thanks, Master Chief. I'm in debt and I didn't know who to talk to. I didn't want to talk to my chain of command because the officers are so whatever. And I kept hearing these things that were very much mundane. And I didn't even think, like, I was like, oh, like, that's just every day what I would do, right? Or not even every day at that point. I was just like, this is just little shit. It wasn't big stuff at all, right? It wasn't that. And I look back on my career and the most memorable things I did. Granted, I had rescues and I did a lot of crap, but like I would remember kind of the sailor that we had this one conversation that was very average, or I would remember these things. And so again, now take my nerd to all of this. And Gandalf in Lord of the Rings says it's in the movie, it's not in the book, but he says it's the small things, the everyday deeds of ordinary folk that keep the darkness at bay. And I thought to myself, I was like, dude, that is what runs a firehouse, right? It's not about the inspection. It's not about the all hands call where the chief gets up and says something. It's never been about that stuff. It's been about the little things that you do that make a difference, right? I mentioned something a couple weeks ago. I said, the impact you can have as a leader by giving somebody an atta girl or an atta boy on a Friday for doing something that you think is so mundane, man, that'll carry them. Rather than saying, I'm going to put you in for an award that's going to take 6 weeks to get through your chain plus up to the public, right, whatever, and then get presented. Like, it doesn't, that attaboy, that attagirl is like so much more impressive and will go so much further, that maybe it just gets them through the weekend and that's all they needed to do because they had a shitty week, right? Like, so it was these everyday things that I was like, man, this means more than all the rest in anything, right? And so again, I look back at not only but then I started talking to people and they're like, yeah, that actually is a lot more impressive. And then I started to do research, and Patrick Lencioni has a great book called The Truth About Employee Engagement, and he talks about what matters, right, and to an employee, and they got to know that they're doing well, and how they're kind of ranking with what they're expected to do with how they are doing. They got to understand that their job has meaning. It's not just meaningless of something. So how do you connect that? And that can get so drawn out when hey, we got another lift, a lift assist, or we got another, oh God, it's crazy old Betty, and she's calling again because her husband died and she just wants to whatever there is. You got to be able to connect. So a great example I used that I saw, I had a great leader that I worked for while I was with in 2015 with the CAG staff. So CAG staff is there's a carrier, and then on board comes the carrier air wing. So that's all the helicopters and jets and everybody else we come in. Well, there's a 30-person staff. I was on that staff. My CAG, John Mann, said to me, he was like, well, I must put this. What he pushed this is very interesting. He pushed for the videos that they were taking from the aircraft as they were bombing on the targets of ISIS. He had them played. He got permission to have them played down on the enlisted decks at the dinner tables, right? So on the screens, you could watch kind of the bombers happen. They could do their strafing runs. And again, I know it's a little bit, but what it did, and I didn't realize this at the time, and I talked to him after, is that it connected the guy who loaded that bomb onto that aircraft. It connected him to doing a mission and doing something that was worth it, right? Killing an ISIS person who is bad. Got it, dude, right? That it connected that whole thing going backwards. And then even more, it connected the person who serves, right? So I made the food that the ordnance person who loaded the bomb, right? And so when you connected that all, and I didn't realize it at the time, I had to wait until I was retired, but I was like, and again, probably unintentionally, I'm sure it was just like, man, we want to show some people some cool stuff so they get a good feeling. But I'm going to tell you this, AJ, and I swear to you, this is true. We went out for a 10-month deployment. And now a lot of deployments, especially when you're just training and you're not really doing stuff that happened a lot before the wars kicked off, you had a lot of problems with people, right? Like a lot of disciplinary problems. You'd pull into a port, a lot of shit happened, right? You already know, right? Idle hands, that type of thing. I will tell you, we ported almost every 35 to 40 days. We had to refuel. We got 3, 4, 5 days off. I've never seen shorter lines outside the disciplinary offices than there, because people were doing the mission. They were tied and connected to what was happening. They felt like they were doing. And look, this too. Well, I'll tie a knot of fire. Not everybody's going to carry a baby out and get on the picture, front page of the paper that you did. It's not going to happen all the time. Somebody may get one of those in their lives. And I've known a lot of firefighters who have never had a major blaze, right? Like, especially being around. And then you go to some places and they're having blazes all the time. So there's a disconnect sometimes of all that. And so I think like when you talk about this everyday stuff and now tie this to kitchen table, that's an everyday thing, right? It's an everyday kind of normalized thing that now all of a sudden you can go. And look, what I've realized too is I had one of the head of Under Armour was part of our mastery group when I was with Lions Guy. And I can tell you, he was like, yeah, but if I tell them that, they're mixed. I swear to God, word for word. He was like, if I tell them good job every week, then they're going to expect it. And I go, yeah, but first, are you only going to say it if they are doing a good job? Yeah. I'm like, oh, I'm like, then say it again. And he goes, well, then I was like, oh, wait, right. And he had this like epiphany moment of being like, if I'm saying it and I'm only saying it because I mean it, then they're doing a good job every week. And that's what I want from my people anyways, right? So I was like, there's a whole, right, it's a whole system of stuff. And let's be real, it's just about being human. Like, it's not about more. Like, we've forgotten kind of just get around the kitchen table and just, be human. Have these human interactions, have these everyday moments that'll really, I think, matter more, especially in today's age, right? Get people off this, go play a game, like like there's human moments that we, I think, can, because you want to talk about retention. You don't think that'll fix retention by doing that? You want recruitment? Let them see that you're connecting these influencers, these leaders at a table. That you want to help burnout? Get around a table and start just talking about shit, right? So you deal a lot with beneath the helmet. I think you get around a table and you start talking about debriefs after, hey man, I know we just had that. What'd you think about it or whatever? I think that's way more open, and that's how people want us to be more open about stuff and honest. You're gonna lift some of that burden that people, and you know this, people just hold it inside and then they get out, and now it forms into PTSD or whatever. And just because you have a big incident doesn't mean some small incident's not. So I just think these everyday moments are what's more important than kind of all the big stuff put together in the policies. It's this everyday thing that I think it's the most important thing we can do, honestly.
Couldn't agree more. And when you mentioned burnout, I was in my mind, I was thinking mental health, wellness, because what a way to go to work every day and be surrounded by people that want to hear your story, want to listen to you, want to share their experiences with you. What a way to defuse from the traumas or even just the stress they were experiencing. That's a perfect opportunity, right?
100%.
Yeah.
Look, I am a firm believer in that. I'll equate it to this. It's kind of relatable, but we used to have qualifications. When I got to Whidbey Island, all of our qualifications were on a grease board up on the wall, right? And you could see them. You could walk in and you can see them. I equate that to a lot of the stress that we carry around with us all the time, right? Like if it's bottled up, or it said, well, I'm going to hold my stress until I talk to my mental health provider at the end of the week, or, oh, we just had an incident. Yep, the CIST is set for, 4 days from now or whatever. I think that bottle up, you lose so much, right? You lose instantly. So when we got to, one of the things we did in the Navy all the time, every single time we had a flight, we had a debrief right after, right? And so it was lessons learned. It was what did we see? It was exactly all that kind of stuff. And then they didn't last long. They didn't need to. If it was a mundane flight, hey, anybody got anything? No, we're good. But if we got something, we were like, whoa, hold on a minute. Let's just talk about that. Did you guys see that the way we saw it? You got it out. Like you just got it out from inside you. And I know that seems so simple, but like if you just get it out, I tell my kids, I tried to just say it. If you just say it, it's not inside you. Even if you don't act on it, it's just said, right? Or you write it out, right? Whatever, it's outside of you, right? So that way you're remembering it how you want to, fresh, whatever. And I know this seems so simple, but I just feel like, so now get around a table and just get it out. Just get it out. It's out there. And as long as you have the culture and the environment around it, right, to make sure that nobody's going to, destroy you for it, or nobody, it's not going to be taken out of context to some degree. And you have this way of saying, oh, no, that's, you have this kind of thing where you're not putting, if that's in place, I feel like, to your point, you love to come to work then, because right? Like it's okay. Whatever you're going to face, if you're worried about seeing something horrible, then that at least though you're going to share with it, and that other people are going through the same shit you are. And that I think is comforting in a fact, because I think sometimes we live in those silos where we go, nobody saw it like I saw it. And the truth is we all probably see it 90% the same anyway, right? Like there's just, so yeah, I think that just saying something and being out there is so important, just to get out there and get it out, especially with our mental health side, right? Like how much more, I shudder in a good way to think how great would it be just to be able to just let loose on stuff without having to hold it for 20 years. And then all of a sudden I have one that I'm dealing with my provider. I had to hold it for all that time. And now, it has turned into me using it in ways I don't want to use it, right? Like I never intended it to be that way. And it's affecting, it just affects the way that I act towards my kids, in general. Right. So I think it's super important to be able to do that if we can. And we have by the way, we have the generation right now that is the most open to it, right? Like they're so open to just feeding all that kind of stuff because they are so raw. They're not polished. They don't want to be polished. This is perfect time to integrate some of this kind of stuff.
Yeah, prime time. You mentioned Patrick Lencioni, and one of my favorite books is The Five Dysfunctions of a Team. And,
Yeah.
the bottom two rungs of his pyramid is trust and avoiding conflict are two ways that you're
Yes.
going to mess up. And the kitchen table is two ways you could build trust and actually have conflict that is respectful, polite, and professional, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
those are like the foundations. Everything above that, I forget the top three, but the two bottom ones for me is like trust and avoiding conflict. That's how you're going to have a dysfunctional team. So if you flip that around and
Yeah.
build trust instead of avoiding it, and conflict, and those are sometimes conflict is that tough conversation around the kitchen table, right? So
Yeah. And I think that opens it up, right? If you have the culture that you have to be able to have those, and look, we got to get better. I'm not definitely not going to. I will blame us Southerners down here for this. We're so divided on both sides that we can't have an open conflict. We can't have healthy conflict because you end up going so far right or so far left, and it's so polarized. But now get back. We don't have to have that in the fire service, right? Like we don't have to bring that in. I got into I had a hot take. I don't know. It was about 6-7 months ago where someone was like, "Don't bring any of your politics into the fires. Don't bring it around the fire." And I said, first, the newest generation wants to know where you stand, but that doesn't mean that they're right. Like if you're not so polarizing in how you're acting, and you're just saying, hey, this is how I see it and why, versus right, like you're completely wrong. How are you, you're an idiot. That's a different way. And I think the same thing when you just take politics out and just have any conflict at a fire service and go, hey, hold on. Just I want to let you know how we see it on ours. One of the things we talk about in our workshop all the time is the view of the newbie, the view of the the battalion chief, and the view of the chief, right? And how the chief sees it as, I got to get funding for these spots, or so I'm always out there doing stuff, right? The battalion chief sees it as, this is my shift. If I don't have the people on the shift who I need, whatever, right? And then your junior folks see it as, man, that's unsafe if we don't have those people. Like, we're just trying to get people so we don't have to do the entire, like, 3 different levels to look at something. And that's just from a rank perspective. Now take a experience perspective. Now you have an entirely different kind of set of eyes looking at something, of saying, okay, right? So in that case, just being able to see everybody else and what they're doing, like, and we know this, and this is my shout out to all the chiefs. You got so much stuff above you that you're owed, right? You got county people that you have to work with, Providence people that you have to, whatever it is. Your junior folks don't need to see that, but they do, in my eyes, need to know at least what it, like, you got to translate it for them, right? It's got to trickle down to go, hey, just so you guys know, this is what this means. I was talking to a group the other day. They're like, oh, Flip, you can, you can do all this stuff, but how do you help budget wise? And I said, all this is budget. Well, we don't have budget. And I said to them, I said, okay. I said, you're right. I said, the end all be all, someone could shut me up when they say, we don't have budget. And I go, no problem. And I said, but let me just dive in a little, give me a little bit. And I said, okay. And I said, are you operating at your fullest capacity, maximizing what you need to, and everything else? Well, and then you dive in, you start to, like, I know the answer. The answer is no, right? But you start to pick it apart and you go, okay, now if you're a county commissioner and you're trying to decide, by the way, who gets money, are you going to go for the group that doesn't have their house in order? Or are you going to go for the police department, or right, somebody else who's got their shit in order and they're not causing issues and they're not, right? Like it's a no-brainer at that point. Like, just because you think I'm lacking doesn't deserve that you get all your stuff in order, operate how you need to, get, community involvement. Like, like, of course people are gonna, like, you're the fire guys. This is the other thing I was discussing with somebody. I was like, you don't have the political ties like police do, right? Like, police are like, oh shit, did we go overboard, right? That kind of thing. Like, you don't have that. Fire's always usually good, right? Like, it's not bad in a way, right? So I was like, you already have an advantage over the blue. Like, just, but use it how you see fit. So but again, to me, that's a leadership issue. Like, Is your house in order? Are you operating the way you need to then be able to show people, hey, these guys are making a difference, in how they are, so I can tie leadership to budget, even if everybody says they don't have any. If you're a great proponent to the community, people will want, hey, your fire guys need something, right? Like there's a difference for that. So again, I tie it all to leadership in a lot of different ways.
100%. It all comes down to leadership. So speaking of that, for the listener who's maybe aspiring to be a leader, maybe a brand new leader, what would be one thing that you would recommend them to spend a little bit more time on that they're maybe not learning from traditional school in regards to officership?
Yeah, I would say look outside the service, right? So you and I just talked about a good one, right? You can pick up almost three off the top of my head: the temptations of a CEO, the truth about employee engagement, and the five dysfunctions of a team. Three of them that I would go absolutely 1,000,000% you should read. I would say though, start to look outside the service a little bit. I'm not trying to listen. I know we can handle our own stuff, but you can be the one bringing it to them to do. There's a Peter Yunes just came out with a great book called Project Management in the fire service, a great book about being able to kind of take PMP type stuff and start to apply it to to how you do business. I think I think that's one way to expand, because again, I'm not this isn't about saying that listening to your 25-year battalion chief of what he says is legendary in lore. Sure, absolutely, you should. Should you also make sure that you're studying and up on all your fire officer and all the qualifications that you need to in whatever country that in Providence? Yes, you 1,000,000% have to do that. No problems. But we and you know this, and we both agreed already to it. You guys seem the same way. You're going to get promoted into that seat based on what they believe you can do when you get there. Not necessarily that you've shown, right? You've shown just enough to get there. You're going to get there, and all of a sudden, you're going to get it on a Friday, and on Monday, the expectation is, whoa, now we're here. And we don't do it good enough for mentorship when we promote, but that's a whole other side of this. So I would say to you, if you start to look a little bit outside, you don't need to be a lot, but if you're reaching captain and above, you should be looking at other things to say, okay, we can look at something like a Lencioni book and go, yeah, let me look about it, the truth about employee engagement, because it's going to bring a whole other thing of what you need to now give to the people you have the privilege to lead, right? Because I truly believe it's a privilege to lead other people. So you owe it to them in a way to do better on yourself. And we don't. I found this all the time in the military. The special operations side was good. Those dudes got money and they would go to, different places to get things way faster than we ever could procure them, kind of on the regular side, if that makes sense. So, but I say that because we would get stuck with the old gear that you've always had because it was so hard to procure things as we went the way through, right? So, and that was just cold weather gear or whatever. I can remember getting cold weather gear for the first time in Whidbey that was experimental. And it was like, this is just, it's an outer shell and a base layer. Like, we didn't have that before. It was one suit that was like, but that suit would get you killed. Or we were given boots with steel toes and said, go ahead out on the mountain. I'm like, my foot's gonna freeze, right? So we were using Danners, and that was like something blowing somebody's mind because it was against regulate. Like, so I say the same thing to an aspiring leader or a new leader. Like, look outside just a little bit and go find something that someone's doing, or in a sense of, especially leadership wise, because there's a ton out there, right? Like, and again, I'm not going to tell you where to look. There's so much. You can get Jocko, you can get Simon, you can get Maxwell, you can get Lencioni, you can get all of them. Go look at that. There's great ones, by the way. Villanueva, Samson is out. Like, there's great ones in fire right now that are out. Brotherhood Suburb, the Modern Day Firefighter, the Project. I think all those ones are amazing as well. That like you can at least take on board that's outside of the normal curriculum that can just add to your piece. Because what you're going to find, and you just proved it, by the way, I love that this just happened. You're not going to take it all in. You just said, you go, I can't remember the top three, but I know the bottom. You're going to take one or two things from all of those places, and you're going to form your mentality of what that is. Mine specifically, like the checklist manifesto is a big one for me. Lead yourself first is a big one for me. Yeah, I use Traction, which is a great book about kind of like EOS, or the operating system for entrepreneurial operating system. You want to talk about, if you're a chief and you're looking to like, my mission and my vision, I just came on board and I'm using the same one that we've had for 50 years and I haven't changed it. Grab Traction. Look at that, because it'll walk you through to go, is your mission, is your vision fitting what you do now? I'm working with Kodiak, Chief Rich Gonzalez up in Kodiak, Alaska, so north of you. And he has a brand new $23 million facility. And we did this exercise, what we do called Walk the Bay, where I have people like close their eyes and go, does your mission and your vision fit what you're doing in your new facility? Is that exactly how you guys plan things out? And it's interesting when people go, actually, that doesn't fit what we do now. And I've caught a couple departments who, I had one department, I won't say who because you can probably Google it if you wanted to, but I swear to you, their mission and vision was, I swear, that we're here to help. That's it. That's all it was. And I'm like, how do you tie anything to that? Like, how does someone get motivated? Go, we're here to help. Like, that's a slogan that you say to somebody at your, at the local seatbelt thing, like when you're helping people put seatbelts in their car or some shit. Like, that's not something you can tie your foundations to. So the biggest takeaway for me is to go, it doesn't all have to be in the fire service that you get this from. And there's going to be so much stuff out there that you're going to take little tidbits and form this kind of lead, just as you would the good leaders and the bad leaders that you've met are literally what is making you who you are. The same thing, right? But this is, you got to be able to look at it. Mattis is a great, again, if I haven't told you that I love Mattis, but he says it all the time. Like, if you're not reading books, as a leader, you're functionally illiterate. He's like, because you can't experience everything. So like, to hear others' experiences, at least go, okay, I at least know about something, which I think, right? G.I. Joe used to say, knowing's half the battle, right? So,
yeah.
Right,
I haven't heard that in a long time.
I know, right? I'm gonna age myself again on this one. So, but it's true in a sense of saying, well, at least I know what's coming, right? I talk about in my thing, I talk about three different kind of beliefs in kind of yourself, and then we have these abilities, these core abilities, and part of it, which is the one for your company or the one for your department, I get into like weather ability, sustainability, and adaptability, and how those abilities are like something that as a leader you have to hone and you have to master those skill sets of, right? Because you're always going to be, so how do we do it if we have 4 people that can't go to work, right? Like, how do we sustain, or how do we weather that storm, right? And what do we do to adapt to that? And then, oh, by the way, 3 of them are quit. Now, what do we do to weather this whole thing and sustain it for as long as we can without it? Are we going to change? Are we going from 24/72s to whatever? Like, what are we doing now with our shifts that we have to change things? So I look at things like that and say, yep, we got to master some of these skill sets and at least know that they're out there. And so I think reading does that. You at least pick up something. It doesn't need to be, right? You can find great books and use AI to give you your summaries. Like, that's fine with me. Like, I don't, just go out there though as a young leader and find different things that kind of you can bring back in, because that's what's gonna help drive change, right? It's not same old will work, but the rest of it has to come from other places sometimes, and you're gonna find inspiration all over.
I think most of my inspiration on the leader I became came from books that were outside the fire service. 100%. Just little nuggets from each one, right? Like, some books I don't read cover to cover. I kind of I skim through it at the very beginning, and then I pick out the nuggets and the areas that I want to focus on and learn about that, and on to the next thing, right? So
yeah, I think that's the false thing. People think reading is like, oh, if I don't do it cover to cover, you feel like like, oh, I'm not a real reader. Like, I got a million books on my shelf, and I haven't read. Like some of them I've kept because I haven't started yet, but other ones, like it was like, oh man, I got enough what I needed out of that, and that's all I needed. I didn't need to read more about it. So
Well, Flip, I think we could spend another 4 hours chatting.
probably.
What would be, is there one thing that you wish I asked you that I haven't asked you yet?
Ooh, jeez. I don't know. That's a good one. I don't know. I wasn't ready for that one. No, I guess just ask me. Yeah, I don't know. What's my quote? Where did I get my quote from? How about that one? And then what is it? Right?
Okay, well, let's hear it.
You ready? So I was working on I have my master's in disaster response and risk mitigation, and so I was working on I have a doctorate in pastoral, and I said I don't need the doctorate anymore. I'm just going to work on this piece. So, but they had me. We had to come up with our own quote, and I'm a big like my mentors of my book. Colin Powell's one of them. Mattis is another one. If you haven't read the 13, if you haven't read Powell and his 13 things, like I'm telling you, everybody tomorrow would change the way that they. So we also have this thing called the next shift action, right? So anytime we do something in Firehouse Freedom, we want to make sure that we're doing not just flowery shit like theory. It's got to have a next shift action to it. Anyone right now can take Powell's, just go Google Powell's 13 rules, and you can apply those tomorrow on your next shift, period. Right. So but anyways, so they all had quotes. So they made me make a quote. So I did. And it took me a while. And when I first made it, I had no depth to it. It was just what I really thought I truly believed as a leader. And it has now evolved to me as a father, as a husband, and still now as this leader in this space that I have the privilege to work in. And that is honesty, consistency, and transparency from the top down. Always builds trust, loyalty, and respect from the bottom up. And all the things that we've talked about today, I think you got to give your trust, your loyalty, and respect to people before you're going to get it from them. And as long as you stay honest, consistent, and transparent, whether that's right, consistency is huge. Like you can't, when you start to dissect that and go, oh yeah, like you look at your best people, and my best people were consistent, whether that was hardlined or whether it was right, like consistently making sure it was consistent. And then transparency. And I get it. People always say, well, you can tell people a lot. Like they can handle a lot. And as long as you give it to them in the right way, like they can handle a lot. I get legally, sometimes you can't say shit. I understand. But like so like that came from just looking back at all the stuff and going, man, that's what the people that I've mentored, that I've menteed, that I was part of, that were this way with me. And I will tell you now, I do that. I didn't realize it at the time, but now as a dad and as a husband, I feel it's always the same way. Just be that way. You want to be a good husband or a good spouse. Like be honest, be consistent, and be transparent. Right? Like that's not a bad thing because it's you're trying to be your ring's based on trust, loyalty, and respect, anyways. Right? So, but again, that was just kind of the thing. But it's that's the thing. I wish you did. You did now ask. You don't even have to wish you did.
There you go. Well, what an awesome way to kind of end it, because that kind of really, encapsulates everything we chatted about. So thanks for sharing your quote there.
Of course.
So how can people learn more about Firehouse Freedom? How can they connect with you? And maybe what's next for you? What's on your next steps?
Yeah. So connecting is easy, right? So firehousefreedom.com, we're there, or you can send me an email at flip at firehousefreedom.com, and definitely check those out. Some things coming up we're super excited about. So I actually write for, I don't know, I should have probably mentioned this, but I write for Firehouse Magazine actually too as well. So I do a leadership column that comes out monthly. So definitely you can get out there and read things. Connect with me on LinkedIn. It's the only Keith Flip in parentheses Griffin that's there. And then coming up, I'm super excited that very much like Lencioni, I have a new book out of almost homage to him. I have a book coming out probably the end of the summer is what we're doing. I'm in the editing phase, which I did not know was as hard as it is. So I have a book coming out soon about a fictional firehouse called the Firewood Fire Department. And it goes through a lot of all this kind of stuff and really shows kind of these issues, but shows what they would look like from a perspective of this kind of fictional fire department, and kind of you can see it in that way. And then just like, again, all my mentors that I'm doing, like Powell, he comes out just blatantly and tells you the bottom line up front piece. So it's going to be this very much, if you want to use it as a reference book, like you just talked about, you can do it that way. And it's easy to reference because it's simplified. And then reading a little bit more of the details of what it would look like if, you know, a probie comes to you with an issue, or you've got issues of manning, or you've got issues of burnout or whatever. I try to tackle all that stuff. And then in a couple of weeks, we're going to be restarting all of our webinars. So on Thursdays, you can catch a free webinar that just talks a little bit about us and doing the workshops, coming to your fire department to do the workshops, doing the online thing, all those type of stuff. We can do those, and we can definitely, we just want to get on and talk and learn, because every time we talk to a new group, whether we're with them, you know, whether we do something with them or not, we're learning. And right now we have about 10 fire departments that we're in kind of in works with, doing things with, which is great for our little 3-man capacity. We're having a good time, but it's a lot of fun to get out there and just to get in front of people, learn about a new fire department and what they're doing. So we're excited for the rest of this year and what we kind of have on tap, and looking forward to kind of just keep working.
Oh, fantastic. Well, I think I'm going to have you back on the show when the book comes out for sure then, eh? We're going to have to dive into that a little deeper. Yeah.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I'd love to.
Sounds good. Parting words to our listener.
Stay safe. I think that's, you know, I mean, it's all going to, it's going to be there, but, you know, I always tell people, just stay safe. You're going to, you know, you'll get there and start outreaching. That's it. Just treat humans like humans. That's one of the things.
Yeah, 100%. Humanize the fire service. We talked about that before, right? Is both of our missions, right? So
absolutely.
Fantastic. Flip, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, your experience, and creating this Firehouse Freedom to share it with the world. So appreciate that.
Thanks, AJ.
All right, everyone. Hopefully you had a pen and paper and jotted down some of these nuggets that we shared today. And be sure to check out Firehouse Freedom and also the new book. All right, everyone. Until next time, stay well. All right, that's a wrap.
Thank you for tuning in to Beneath the Helmet. We hope that this podcast has provided you with valuable insights into the world of firefighters' health and wellness. Remember, caring for your physical, mental, and spiritual well-being is crucial to achieving optimal performance. Join us next time on Beneath the Helmet for more inspiring conversations. Until then, stay well.